This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at Vinta Inks Carlos. I'll be testing this ink in a variety of pens and nib sizes ranging from a Pilot Extra Fine to a 1.5 stub. Now, this is a really dark, somewhat saturated green ink. I don't know if you can tell from this initial writing sample, but as we go through this, maybe you'll be able to tell. This is a Pilot 78G Plus with an extra fine nib. Very nice, especially for a nib this fine. And instead of labeling this smooth, I'm going to label this, I'm kind of rethinking how I describe how the pen's write. I'm going to say that this is nice, because relative to other inks in this extra fine, yeah, this is smooth, but not relative to a medium nib. This is an extra fine nib. There's going to be typical feedback that you would expect from an extra fine nib, so I'm just going to say, for this pen, for this extra fine nib, that ink is very nice. I like it. That's something. In fact, I'm going to put a little heart beside this one. This just tells me, reminds me that that would be a nice pen and ink combination to use. All right, this is a Pilot Prera with a fine nib. Not a whole lot smoother than the extra fine, but again, I find it very pleasant, so I'm going to put nice beside this one. I like really saturated inks and fine nibs. All right, let me see, which one is this? This is another Pilot 78G. This is the original version, and it's a medium nib. I'm having a few dry spots here. And again, because this is so dry, there's not much of an increase in smoothness. Now that's the original 78G. This is the updated 78G. It also has a medium nib. So this is the 78G Plus, the updated one. Now I'm getting a little more ink down on the page, so I can feel the nib tending to glide across the page now. That's surprising. It looks like there's less ink, but I'm going to go ahead and label this one smooth. It is noticeably smoother than the previous three. All right, I've got another recently acquired pen. This is a 78G, the original version. It's a bold nib or broad nib, but it's a stub. There's not any tipping on this. This is also dry. I'm noticing that the 78Gs, the originals, lean toward or are noticeably drier than the updated models. So I'm going to mark that dry. That's a little disappointing. Okay, and the Pilot Prera with a cursive medium. This has always been a nib that's on the drier side, but it's writing a little wetter than the 78G broad nib. It's okay. It's nothing exciting. Okay. Now I've got a Nemesign Singularity with a 0.6 stub nib. Now this I like. It's putting down significantly more ink. This is a narrow stub nib like I like. I'm going to put a heart beside this one. I like that. I like how rich the ink looks. And finally, I've got a Jinhao X750 with a 1.5 stub nib. All right. One of the things I like about this green ink is it's really saturated, it's really dark, but there's some brightness to it. It's not drab like, you know, some olive greens are. I like this. All right, I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and I'll take a look at some of the writing samples on other papers. This is my little ARC notebook, and I don't have anything labeled here. One thing I want to note, this was from an earlier writing sample, like when I did my first impressions. Let's see. One of my favorite pens to use this in is this Skyline Sport. It's putting down a decent amount of ink, but it's kind of hard to see in this lighting. But there's some just nice subtle shading. I like that. Now, in my CP1, I had an extra fine nib. It put down quite a bit of ink, but I'm not seeing the shading. It's just all the darker tone. I really like this Kaweco Skyline Sport where you can see a little bit of the green coming through. All right. But my Lilliput with an extra fine nib did not put down quite as much ink. It was okay too. You see a little more of the green there. All right, but I didn't label any of these. I wouldn't describe them as smooth, but they weren't exactly scratchy. They were just, okay. Nothing special other than the way they look. The Pilot 78G extra fine was perfectly legible. See some shading in some of these stub nibs. One of the things, let me see. Oh yeah, I wanted to point out on the Pilot Prera, it had a little trouble getting started, but you notice there's some shimmer in there. When I cleaned out the Prera the last time, the last ink I had in it was the Robert Oster Aussie Liquid Gold. I didn't get all the shimmer out of there, but once you get to the end of the writing sample, the shimmer's gone and it's writing okay. All right, but I didn't, all of these other pens had the Aussie Liquid Gold and I didn't see any shimmer left over in them. All right. And on my Rhodia paper, again, the Kaweco Skyline Sport was one of my favorites. The only one that I marked, the old medium, the 78G, it was a little dry. The rest were perfectly pleasant to use. Yeah, the one that was dry had a little trouble skipping in some spots. But again, the Skyline Sport and the Nemesign were my favorites. On 20-pound copy paper, the extra fine was nice, and so was the fine. The older dry medium was nice and smooth. Now, when you get into the wetter nibs, it starts feeling a little too wet for that absorbent copy paper, but when you look at it, all the nibs did really well, except for the stub nibs wanted to bleed through, and that's typical. On my Leuchtturm paper, it was a little bit dark. All I see is, now the little ink smear is a pretty green, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of shading. It's just all really dark. You know, comes across as mostly black. And finally, on the Tomoe River paper, I don't see any sheen. I see some subtle shading in the stub, and in the Nemesign, it's kind of hard to see on camera. Maybe y'all can see it. I see just little hints of green. I like that. I prefer that. On the other two stub nibs, the Prera and the 78G, it's mostly green, mostly the lighter shade. I like it when it's mostly the darker shade. But this is a nice ink for extremely fine nibs, I find. All right. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.